Thames now.
Flood warnings are nothing new to London. Throughout its history, it's been in danger of flooding from the Thames. Samuel Pepys, for example, in 1663, writes of all Whitehall having been drowned. But now, for a number of reasons, the danger is greater than ever. England, it seems, is slowly tilting, up in the northwest, down in the southeast. London, in fact, is slowly, very slowly sinking. And on top of that, tides are getting higher. Records kept since 1791 show that the levels of high water have steadily increased over the past 180 years. Now, both those facts account for much of the increased risk. But the real danger comes from the surge tides that flow out of the North Sea. In 1953, a vast surge tide built up under a depression moving down the east coast. A wall of water 6 feet high hit the Thames estuary just 2 hours before high water on a normal tide. 300 people died. On that occasion, the water came up to here. And you can see just how much higher that is than the level of the Thames at the moment. But now, partly because of the increased height of normal tides, and because of the flood banks built to protect the lower reaches of the Thames, more water would be channeled up to London. And a surge tide not very much greater than the 53 one would now top the banks and pour floodwater into central London. This is Woolwich Reach, one of the most historic stretches of the river, where we're going to see one of the most dramatic developments in London's flood defences. A giant flood barrier stretching the 600 yards across the river from here where we're standing now. And it's taken them 20 years and £75 million to solve some of the problems involved. They've chosen this part of the river because it's one of the few stretches where it holds straight for a mile or more. Flow patterns around a curve are very difficult to predict. And it lies conveniently just upstream of the main docks area for large ships, and yet far enough downstream to protect the centre of the city. Yet here or elsewhere, it's very difficult to imagine a dam across the river. In fact, it will be a movable dam or barrier, unlike any other tidal barrier that's ever been built. Only the stone supporting piers will be permanently in position. Smaller ones, closer to the banks, and in the main channel, 5 large ones, 50, 60 feet above the water, 200 feet apart, to allow plenty of room for shipping. And they'll support a series of huge steel gates, which will rise out of the river to hold back the floodwaters. You can see in more detail how this rising sector barrier, as it's called, will work on this larger scale research model where they're working on water flow patterns. Now, this represents just one sector of the barrier, 200 feet across. And when there's no danger, it'll lie out of sight, like this, on the bed of the river, in a specially prepared concrete housing. As soon as there's warning of a flood tide, however, it'll be pivoted through 90 degrees into a vertical position. And all the sectors together will form a continuous steel barrier right across the Thames. Now, each gate like this will weigh a massive 4,000 tonnes. And it'll take only 15 minutes to raise it into a vertical position to protect London. Construction work on the Woolwich barrier has now started. Meanwhile, flood walls have been raised from Chiswick to the London docks. Interim protection until the barrier is ready in 5 years' time. Other emergency systems are ready too. This is the flood barrier on the River Lee, where it joins the Thames. Massive steel gates hang poised over the water until needed. This design works well for the narrow Lee, but would be ugly and unmanageable over the much wider Thames. When the flood warning sounds, the 3 gates slide ponderously into place, blocking off the incoming surge of water. So the Thames has been kept at bay, contained by walls and barriers along its banks and tributaries. London has its interim defences. And London has built up an elaborate system of warning devices to make sure that it gets sufficient notice of any threat. A storm tide warning service, for example, keeps the London Flood Control Room advised of any build-up of surges on the east coast. And at any time, engineers can get actual readings of water levels by phone. By dialing a special code number, they get through to a series of sensors and telemetering units installed at various points on the bank. And after a burst of the unobtainable signal to warn away casual callers, back comes a series of quarter-second bleeps, giving the water level in metres. London's emergency interim defences were completed this year. But what are the chances of a surge tide occurring before 1978 that would put disastrous amounts of floodwater over these banks? Well, as calculated by the GLC, they're just 40 to 1. To a bookmaker, perhaps, outside odds. But to me, they seem remarkably high. Let's hope Sweet Thames continues to run softly, at least until that barrier sits in the river at Woolwich.
For a great many people, Christmas has become very much a television occasion. But in case you've decided to miss out a couple of programs, here's a brand new idea from the United States which can turn your television set into a game that two can play. All you have to do is, first of all, to switch it off, unplug the aerial, plug in the electronic game simulator, switch on the set again, and now who's for tennis? Because that's what we're going to play. There's a choice of hockey, baseball, skiing, roulette, or even football, American football, of course. And having made your choice of game, you select the appropriate programming card, select it into the master control unit, which you have to have for any game, and of course for tennis, you have two player controls. The main control unit is a battery-powered transmitter, and with the tennis game card in position, on the screen appears the net and two squares representing the players. Right, Wimbledon, here we come. Each player has two main controls. This one moves his man on the screen vertically, this one horizontally. This one gives a crafty bit of spin to the ball. It's labeled English, and this reset button serves. You ready, Jen? Play. 15 love. That was my point. 30 love. Again. $40 love. Again. Oof, so much for tennis. But now, if you're a bad loser and feel like shooting your opponent, you can always take to rifle practice. The rifle is attached to the central control unit by cable in the same way. Down its barrel is a photoelectric cell which is exposed when I pull the trigger. If I'm on target on the moving dot of light as it goes across the screen, it will disappear. If not, it'll keep right on going. Okay, let's see if the old hand and I have lost their cunning.